And we are live.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It's January 18th, 2024. It's 6:01. This is a special meeting of the Western Connecticut Board of Education. It's our second in a public forum to review and discuss the fiscal year 2025 budget. We have a quorum, so the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Great. So item number 3 is public comment on the fiscal 25 operating and capital budgets. Jody, if
Okay. I do see that there are some people that are listed as attendees right now. I'll just run through the process for you. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. There is a little button at the bottom of your screen that says raise hand. Just click it once. Don't click it twice. Only click it once. When I go to promote you to a panelist, you're going to see something pop up across your screen that you're going to have to accept. And then once you become a panelist, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera on, state your name, and state your street address. If there is anybody that would like to speak for public comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. Remember, just hit the raise your hand button once. Okay, I have an attendee. Alex, I'm going to promote you to a panelist.
Great. And before we start, before we take public comment, I just want to note that over the past few weeks, members of the board and members of the public have submitted questions on the budget, and Lisa and the members of the administration have responded to all of those in writing, and they're all posted on the Board of Education website. And I believe, Lisa, we've addressed every question that's been proposed.
Yeah, if I can just add something really quick before we turn it over to the public. What we tried to do was we took the transcript of the public forum, if you will. We looked at it as well as the board workshop, and we tried to kind of synthesize some of that information into different themes. I will say up front, if there were, we did our attempt to answer it to the best of our ability in good faith. Was every question answered word for word? Definitely the spirit of the answers are there. And we try to also in an appropriate, timely manner get the answers out. So as Steve said, they are posted there, and we hope that the public finds the additional information helpful. I think the plan again tonight is to listen to questions and undergo the same process with our next workshop meeting, correct?
Yes, right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll listen now. Thank you.
Okay, Alex is just rejoining. Okay, Alex, you're now a panelist. Can you please turn on your camera and unmute yourself and state your name and your street address for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
So I'm Alex Staley. I live at 42 Lords Highway. So appreciate the effort on the questions that I personally sent, but then others had sent, including the Board of Education. The supplemental responses are very helpful in understanding a little bit more detail on some of the items. I guess my comments here are mostly comments for the record as opposed to specific questions, but one comment that I'd like to make, and not sure I fully understand the whole process here, but I'm not sure if the schools are looking to update the budget at all for back and forth in the workshops, or when that revision would be headed, but And so if it is, great, look out for that. If it's not, then this comment applies, which is I'm surprised that given all of the back and forth in the workshops and thoughtful questions, which I think most people would agree are to provoke thought leadership, opposed to just looking for clarity. Like there might be some clarifying questions, but I think there's, at least mine are more focused for hopefully to drive thought about like how we could improve the budget. Maybe there's better ways to allocate costs, reduce costs, et cetera. And so if there's not a revision that's going to be expected, I guess I'd like to comment that I'm surprised that that's the case, given all of the great questions the board itself has asked and others, residents, et cetera. Hopefully there is a revision that reflects some of the back and forth. So that's one thing. Another thing,
Can I just stop you there? We generally don't interact, but what do you mean by revision?
I mean, so there's a lot of questions provided by me and others in the board about certain items, why things increased, why things didn't increase, where the money's going, et cetera.
Yeah.
I would expect that all that drives conversation, discussion to say, look, maybe we don't need this, or maybe we should put the cost here and like actually have more of a, iterative process as opposed to like just answering questions and then having the same budget that was developed, right? Like, I don't think that's the purpose of these forums and your guys' shops. They'd all be for naught. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, well, the process is, well, just so everyone knows what the process says, so the process, culminates on January 23rd. So that's when the board, and it's a public forum, of course, talks amongst themselves. We'll have taken all the comments, our own as well as yours and others, and we'll come up with our final recommendation for a budget. So this process is going to continue, and all these comments and all the responses from the administration will be taken into account, and ultimately the board will make a determination on the overall budget.
Okay, that's helpful. Appreciate that.
Okay.
On the specific budget, I'd like to comment that it feels like pairing the new budget with the old budget is an incorrect assessment to do. And I've been several questions asked about the comparison to the actuals, and it feels like in the answer a little bit brushed over. And so I just want to make sure everyone who's on the phone understands that the budget that's being proposed is not 3%, it's close to 6% increase versus what is expected from an actuals perspective. And when you take into account the capital budget, which we don't have actuals on the capital budget, but assuming that that's just exactly the budget, the overall budget is actually 6.5% increase versus 3.5% increase, which strikes me as extremely and given that salaries make up a large portion of that budget and the CBAs, basically govern the at something closer to 3% or less than 3%, that would imply that the non-salary increase is actually much higher than 6%. And it just strikes me as still too high relative, especially knowing how the budget has turned out the last 4 years, which is basically over budgeting. And so, like, you have the salaries that I mentioned, the health insurance piece, which it sounded like there was a new plan implemented last year, which I thought, that gave us some savings. When you look at that budget this year versus actuals, it's over 10% increase, which strikes me as a lot considering if we just change the plan.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That was the 5-minute timer.
I took up some of your time. Go ahead,
Okay.
Alex.
Yeah, so I'll go through the rest of this quickly, but still not clear to me why electricity, natural gas is going up so wildly, especially have these fixed arrangements in place. I don't really understand that. But I guess the bigger point here is that I hope that the board has some influence on driving more of like a very zero-based budgeting method and look at smart cost reductions, because having a $4 million increase that's like 6.5% more than last year when we've been over budgeting for the last 3 years just doesn't strike me as prudent. it just does not strike me that like that approach has been taken into account for this year's budget. And so I'm hoping that the board in the next sessions of this is going to push on it, because it just strikes me as way over budget, especially given the actuals, which have not necessarily been forthcoming. I think it's been asked a couple of times, and that 6.5, that 6% number is not even written anywhere. So I want to make sure it's known that people know the budget's actually going 6% versus the 3.5 that's being presented everywhere. So that's my main comment. The other thing too is like, I don't know like where people are being added from a salary perspective. Salary's been, or headcount's been kept flat for decades, even despite lower enrollment. But I want to urge the board to really look to, like, should we be spending money focusing on individualized learning more so than a shotgun curriculum improvement approach or some of these other costs, where I can tell you as a parent, the biggest focus is on individualized learning. That's why people send their kids to private school. And I feel like that's more valuable to the district and getting the district to a point where it's the most prized school district in the state versus what's the reading curriculum. I'm sure the reading curriculum was just fine, but if there was an extra teacher in every class, instead of the 600,000 that's been spent in 2 years, like that might have been better for people's attention to the district and overall learning. So 2 big points. I really hope there's going to be a push on cost reductions and like really looking at a zero-based budgeting approach, because this over is not sustainable, and like have to rely on the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to figure out where reserves are. The school should be prudent to budget accordingly based on what they know they need exactly. And that accounts for capital budgeting too, which is the last point, is 1.4 million, which is $500,000 more than last year, $500,000 more than really the highest year the last 4 or 5 years. It just strikes me as like a lot of spending, and I'm not sure there's been the direct prioritization on the capital budget that needs to happen considering the other increases in the budget. So I hope that's a focus of the board going forward.
Thanks. Look, Alex, thanks for these comments. I think when you spoke last meeting, everyone everyone appreciated your comments. We appreciate them tonight, and I would encourage you to listen to or participate the upcoming meeting next week where we determine the budget, because you've asked questions that others have asked, and certainly those, a lot of that will be discussed before the board votes. But thank you. Jody, anyone else?
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Go ahead, David.
Alex, I heard you say 2 things. I want to make sure I heard them because they seem to contradict one another. You talk about small classroom size and individual learning, which would be more teachers. But then I heard you say something along the lines of we're overstaffed. I may have misheard you, but
Yep.
Can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, I can. So my point is simply staff headcount enrollment. Student enrollments have increased over the last decade, and staffing has basically been flat or slight increase. And my point is that when I read the answer and looked at some other materials, it seemed like it was focused on the reason headcount similar was from a reallocation of like just different things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean enrollment goes down, headcount goes down. And so my point is simply like, it feels like costs are being spent potentially in areas that maybe aren't the best bang for our buck as a district. And I could tell you that like, when I was looking at Hurlbut, and I know others were looking at Hurlbut, the thing that is one of the driving factors for decision-making on where children go to school is less exactly what the reading curriculum is. Like, I don't know the difference between what you guys did this last year versus there before. I'm sure it was very similar. It may be a little bit better. What I felt you're in the classroom that drove individualized learning, and I felt my child's going to get really tailored teaching and learning for all academics. Like, that would be where I would versus like tweaking the curriculum or some of the capital projects or like things like that. Like, that is where we're going to, in my view, as a parent, people are going to choose Hurlbut and WIS and the high school over going to Green Farms Academy and wherever else. It's not going to be because the reading curriculum. It's going to be because they feel like they have their students going to get a tailored.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Please raise your hand, click the button at the bottom of your screen. We do not appear to have any other members of the public wishing to speak at this time.
Okay. So the next item is just the next two meetings, the meeting on Monday, the 22nd. It's a budget workshop for the board. And then the following evening on the 24th, we have a special meeting where we approve and adopt the fiscal 2025 budget, both operating and capital. And that's the budget that will be transmitted to initially the selectmen, but most importantly to the Board of Finance, and then ultimately to the town. And the townspeople will make the final determination as to what the budget will be for this upcoming fiscal year. And I think that's it. Anything from you, Lisa, that we should talk about?
No,
Okay,
I think we're good.
great. Well, thanks, everybody. I'll see you on Monday.
May I just have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, that's a good point. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn
Is
the,
there go
I
ahead.
move to adjourn. How about that?
How about
I'll
that?
second.
All right.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There we go. Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.